Welcome to the Open Talent Report, the award-winning podcast where we dive deep into the emerging trends in global employment, the future of work, the talent crisis, the demographic deficit, and the new world of work with our expert host, Connor Heaney. Connor is the managing director at CXE EMEA, a company that takes the hassle out of finding, compliantly engaging and paying contractors anywhere in the world. In this podcast, Connor brings you captivating conversations with top CEOs, visionary founders, and industry experts. Together, they shed light on all things open talent and the evolving nature of work itself. So grab your headphones and join us on this exhilarating journey.
Hello and welcome to this week's show where I'm delighted to be joined by Ivana Cvejic. Now, Ivana, I know I've butchered your name. We've practiced loads of times and I still...
Okay.
It's okay. Well, we're friends anyway, but still,
Exactly.
I do apologize, but so good to see you. Ivana is the co-founder of Renhead, a platform that solves workforce and vendor challenges. For those of you who don't know Ivana is a visionary. She's a leader. She's one of the nicest people I've had the pleasure of getting to know in this sector. And there's a lot of nice people, as our listeners know, in this sector. But Ivana is a really great supporter, a really great partner, and so much fun. It's unreal. And she really knows her business. And she has an amazing platform that we're going to hear more about today. So, Ivana, we're recording this on the day, and it's not a politics show, as our listeners know, but it's the 6th of November, 2024. It looks like President-elect Trump is going to be the president of the United States. So hopefully, for our listeners in business, which most are, we're going to start to see some decisions and seeing deals, but it's a momentous day in probably more ways than one. So, Ivana, warm welcome to the show. How are you today? How are you doing?
Thank you, Connor. I'm very good, and I really appreciate you having me on the show. Everything you said, all the nice things you said about me are mutually about you is what I tell people all the time. So I'm very excited to be here, and I love having any conversation with you. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
That's very kind of you. Well, Ivana, a warm welcome and a warm welcome to the show. So, Ivana, I've got to know you over the last few years, as I mentioned, and it's been bloody great to say the least. But just for the benefit of our audience, Ivana, what's your story? How did you become the co-founder of Renhead, which is an amazing platform? But what was your journey to that point? I'd love to hear more, and of course, our listeners too.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, actually. I, like you, started as a recruiter on the full-time side. So I was basically a headhunter. We don't use that term anymore, but I did hunt heads. I was in the financial sector. It was such a fantastic experience. You know, the coaching part was my favorite. And I ended up going in-house. And I think because I didn't come from the traditional banking, Ivy League banking kind of scenario, I was able to come in and really look at things from a different perspective. One of the big things that I noticed and I was very, very frustrated with was the lack of technology to do what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was not standard at the time. I did not want to go in and, put all these requisitions into Career Builder or Monster at the time and, sit at my desk and wait for 100 resumes to come my way. I really wanted to do the proactive outreach and really set this up as a sales team and really build the relationship piece of it. And so the team that I hired, I trained them to do that as well. And so it was a internal recruiting desk. We did all direct sourcing. And in the last phase of that, we were also bringing in consultants because we're building out a big division. So we had FTEs at all levels. We had consultants as well. And we had no platform to put them in. And so that's when I started talking to a longtime friend, Allison Tam, who's now my co-founder, who's a huge visionary. It came in from the fintech space originally. And we started talking and I started telling her about these problems. And we started looking at the market, what was out there. And what we decided to do was, look, we don't want to just rebuild a traditional VMS in new technology. VMSs traditionally have been built on invoicing platforms. which is a very important component of running contingent labor and tracking that spend, but really wanted to incorporate more of a relationship-driven platform and really try to drive companies and enable program leaders to build relationships, whether it's with their hiring managers or vendors or candidates, really enable them to do a lot that they couldn't do in a traditional VMS and archaic technology that was around then. Now the market has changed. There's a lot more options today. But basically, that vision led us to build a full total workforce platform in a very flexible way. So what we did was we built not just a VMS and an ATS as an entire system and pulled them together. We actually built everything feature by feature natively so that any user or MSP who's driving a program, perhaps they can go and really customize and solution out the right platform for the end customer. And so today, we have full features for a VMS. That's really what we lead with and where most of our use cases are. But we also have a full ATS with all of the features that can be turned on and off and supplemented into the VMS for things like direct sourcing and relationship building and pipeline building. We also have CRM capabilities, also for a lot of that, relationship building capability. And we have very robust SAO and project spend features as well. We did not go the traditional route of VCs. We knew it was going to be a big challenge, but we also knew that, we didn't want to leave high-paying corporate jobs so that a VC can tell us how to build this. And given we're from finance, we knew that it was a rat race. It's a rat race to kind of get as quickly as possible to that exit. And we know from experience that that is not the way you want to build technology if you want a sustainable product and if you want to build a good culture inside of your firm and really build a sustainable platform, not just from a product standpoint, but from a company standpoint. Because when you have that, then you can also support the end customer in a way that they need to be. So yeah, that's where we're at today.
Wow. Like, Ivana, there's quite a lot to unpack there, which is great for me and great for our audience. It strikes me listening to you talk about your platform that your platform is of its time. And what I mean by that is we got skills-based hiring, we got increased need for internal mobility. Organizations hate all these single point HRIS systems that don't talk to each other, or else they might have a multitude of them. They dislike having separate ATS, separate CRM, separate VMS, right? And there's this move. I don't think the market's fully embraced it from a buying perspective, but at least there's a ideological move, in my view, to say, let's look at having one system for all sources of talent, right? All talent channels. And I think
Yes.
that's the commercial beauty about your platform, right? So I think that's bloody great. Now, here's my question. Having said all that, and I know what it's like being the underdog, right? Being an underdog company going against much larger incumbents, and there's probably two gorillas in the vendor management market space, which is SAP Fieldglass and Beeline. They're older systems, I suppose, that are trying to catch up with some elements of the market. But that old phrase, like, no one ever got fired for buying IBM. There's a certain comfort if you're a buyer in selecting one of those two. So being the underdog, I think, is actually an advantage, but it's quite difficult too. But all you need to do is chip away at the market over time, and then suddenly you've got a great business, at least from a commercial and a revenue perspective. But I suppose what my question really is this, Ivana: what's it like being the underdog and attacking a much larger market that's dominated by two incumbent players? What's that like? How do you go about it?
It's like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde scenario. One day you're on top of the world, and the next day you're like, oh, fuck. Really is like that. It's such a roller coaster. And It is, it's fun because you are driving something that adds so much value, and you're not just regurgitating what the market has been telling these buyers for the last 20 years. We are so advanced now as a technology, and having, such great technology with, especially now with AI, doing so many of our tasks that we used to have to do manually before. And there are so many companies that are still living, 50 years ago and doing things on spreadsheets. And it is so fascinating when we go up against these technologies, these competitors. Here's what drives me crazy. I'm going to be totally straight with you. When we go into, let's just say, an RFP, this is not a relationship driven process. This is a checks and balances process. It drives me insane because, and we will say, we will refuse to participate in many cases because if you don't have that relationship with them, you are just answering something on a piece of paper, and anybody can answer whatever they want on a paper, but it's not until you actually dig into the tech to see, okay, they answered yes on this, but is it really a yes, or are there nuances there? Or maybe they answered yes, they don't really have it, but they're going to build it as we're onboarding. You've seen that before. We've seen it many times. And so there's a challenge in, we want to be authentic. We have made a point in our vision and the way that we are building and developing and managing our team. We have strict rules about, if we don't have it, we don't have it. We're not going to bullshit our way through it. And that's the hardest part in this because many startups will bullshit their way through it. And then they'll come up to the challenge of, oh my gosh, we thought we could build this in this timeline and we actually can't. And it's caused a lot of issues in the market where there's a mistrust of startups. And I understand that. It's fair. But then you come up as maybe one of the very few startups who will actually give you an honest opinion, and they don't believe it. They're going to question everything. And so it's not just a challenge of going up against a field glass or a beeline. Renhead is luckily, getting to get a name for, our honest assessment of what these solutions need to look like for each individual customer. But then you have the extra added challenge of, this new environment that's been created by startups. And I have to pick apart the whole VC startup scenario because I think a lot of the challenges do come from the VC funded ones because of that race to get to that exit as quickly as possible. It is, as human beings, very easy to just, we'll just say yes on this, we'll figure it out. And it causes issues for everyone, and especially for the end customer. But yeah, Connor, it is very hard.
Yes.
But we are seeing, and I'm so glad for this because we had a hard time for the first few years, I would say.
Yeah.
But we are finally seeing even the biggest enterprises just completely sick and tired of the lies,
Yeah.
and the lack of transparency. And also, they are willing not to take risks of not going with the large logos that are now. And we have to take care of our process because we are falling apart and we are desperate for new solutions. So we are seeing a lot more of that. Actually, I think starting just in the last couple of years.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Ivana, I love hearing that. And I agree with you. It's not easy, but it's exceptionally rewarding. And I don't mean always commercially. There's a really nice challenge about building something from nothing with limited resources apart
The
from,
best.
yeah, I do believe that. And, living on your intellect, your agility, your ingenuity, and your integrity. That piece that you mentioned there really resonates with me. Do not bullshit. Just be, if you can't do it, you can't do it. If you could possibly do it, explain how. And if you can do it, go all in and bloody do a great job. And I love that in integrity piece. Like,
Yeah, I think my best
Yes.
favorite, sorry to interrupt,
Yeah,
my
not at
favorite
all.
milestone of this whole journey was when I was able to legitimately just say no. We were out of that kind of scramble, startup, scrappy stage. And the ability to say no to a customer who, even with the big logos, who I knew would drive my team crazy, for example, because they didn't match our culture and our vibrational kind of innovative, solutioning, energy and vision. It was hard in the beginning because you do have to say yes to stuff that you don't want to do. And by saying no, it kind of, let Allison and I step back and say, okay, we made it. That was the indicator that we made it. And it was the best feeling.
Yes, I love. This is what I love. This is I love. This is one of the reasons I love the podcast. The Ivana hosting it is hearing stories and like yours, Ivana. There's something I want to touch on, and I'm always reluctant with female founders because I don't differentiate whether you're a female, male. I don't care, right? You're a founder, and that's it. But let me caveat it with this. I had a really fascinating lady on the show from Georgia Tech called Melissa Heffer. And
I heard that podcast
you heard
actually.
that part? Yes, you
She was
did.
brilliant. Yep.
Unreal, right? And her job is
Mhm.
really at Georgia Tech to incubate startups and get them off the ground, right? And she's just unbelievably interesting and dedicated. But we did discuss at reasonable length the challenge that female-led founders have, right? And
Yeah.
was that something that resonated with you, Ivana? And if so, why?
It resonated with me on so many different levels. I would pick apart a couple that really hit home for me. I think she talked about, if memory serves me, about the type of support that they are offering these female founders, which was very different than what I have seen typically. And it was more in the emotional and educational support and how to go out there and win, and how to compete with these larger companies. It wasn't about giving them money. That was the last part. It was really about, how do you support female founders, knowing that they have these superpowers of, and the way their brains operate in looking at a problem in a holistic manner and being able to solution that out. And how do you enable that, while teaching them how to really compete in a male dominated industry, in ways that could be uncomfortable, right? So having that support system, we didn't have that, unfortunately. But Alice and I had some great advisors, a couple who you actually know, and who have, coached us and have been amazing supporters for us. But having an entire support system like that, with the capital, with that infrastructure of an entity like Georgia Tech, that is powerful. And I'm hoping that we see more and more of that. What she didn't talk about, which I think is very important, is, when you are a female founder, and buyers don't often think about it from this angle, you cannot take money. If you take money in the beginning, you're immediately not designated as a female founder. So now you have, again, the same kind of population of men who are making the decisions on how this company is going to get nurtured and how it's going to grow, how the product will evolve. And the diversity factor completely goes out the window. If you take money, along the way, it's very little money. These are very expensive products to build. You need so many resources up front. And so that concept of not taking the money and going the difficult route, it extends your timeline significantly.
Sure.
It really puts you at a disadvantage on one hand, but it also enables you to, or forces you really, to have an operating model that is so efficient that a lot of people do not appreciate that. When you have that type of efficiency, you know that a female run and a female owned software is going to support you as a customer in a way that they may not see in other organizations, because we're forced to. We have no option, right? Until you get to that next stage. So, I think that I would encourage buyers to really look at that when they look at, female founders. It's not about a gender. It really is about working with what you have and really putting together the right operating model, the right team. We have very little room actually for failure. And failure is an important part of this whole journey. You learn a lot of lessons. But if you have too much failure as a female founder, it's easy to just go under. And so that's why, my earlier comment about that milestone, being able to say no, like we knew that we had gotten through the really difficult initial years.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you're at the startup and you're moving the scale up and then you're moving to what I would describe as grown up, I think that's a really good way of measuring the evolution
Right.
of your business. The ability to say, well, actually, no thanks. 2 years ago, yes. 1 year ago, yes.
Yeah.
6 months ago, maybe. Now, no.
Yep.
Please come back to me. And I think that's really great. But on the failure point of things, I agree with you. But I also have a view that I'd be interested in getting your take on. I feel that in the business world and the startup world, and particularly in the startup world over the last 10 years, right, there's been a fetishization on failure, that failure is good, failure is great, failure is empowering.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure, because if your business, I don't want a business failure hanging over my head. Do you?
Nobody does.
Exactly, right? So what's good
Yeah.
about that? Okay, you can take all the learnings, but would you agree that there has been in the tech world and the business world, particularly maybe in the tech and the startup world, that failure has been fetishized to the point where it's seen as a really great thing? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think what we're missing here is the right balance in everything, right? So when we go in and talk about, anything in this industry, including failure, you have to have a right balanced approach. Failure to me, it's important to avoid failure, but when it happens, not to judge it and to really encourage that lesson. Why did this happen? Let's learn from it. Let's move forward with that new knowledge. You're right. It is a little bit fetishized. And, again, back to, the founders who, have these, deep pockets behind them. I hate to say it, but a lot of them have not had 20, 30 years of experience running businesses and building, companies. And so a lot of that money and those kind of failure concepts, it's kind of very lighthearted. It's like, okay, we're going to throw money at this. If it fails, it fails. If I'm 25 years old and I can just start over again, they don't have a lot at stake. Now, I'm not picking at, the young founders, because there's really brilliant ones and I really appreciate a lot of the risks that they take as well. But just as a generalization, I think we are moving so far away from a balanced approach in everything, whether that is looking at failure, whether it's looking at, how we manage our workers, how we build our businesses in a sustainable way with that balance, so that when economic cycles go up and down, we can actually support each other and not just throw 30% of our workers out the window and then hire them back in a year. So that balanced approach for anything that we do is, I think, a really important concept that this business environment that we've created needs to get back to.
Yeah, I completely agree, Ivana. I feel that generally in life, but particularly in business now, the nuance has been lost, right? You're either X or you're either Y, right? And
That's
of
right.
course, life is lived in the gray, right? You don't
Absolutely.
you don't drive around honking your horn. Well, on a general basis, you don't drive around honking your horn at everyone saying, "Get the hell out of my way," right? The petty
Some
infringements.
people do.
Some people do, but thankfully they're in the minority, right?
Yes,
But
thankfully.
so as humans, you have to live in the gray. You can't just go to the extreme of black or white, because that doesn't make for a productive society and potentially a productive business.
A is where important conversations happen, and
Yeah.
the conversations that really, allow people to come into the middle and be able to, in a civilized way, have conversations about whatever the issue is and come to some middle ground. It is a matter of how do we come together and actually have conversations in that gray area that you're talking about so that we can connect and we can, listen to each other's ideas and really listen, not, pretend listening, which is a lot of what's happening, and move away from, social media making decisions for us, and allowing each other and supporting each other in creating our own opinions about things instead of just regurgitating what.
Yeah, agreed. Or even worse, what you're reading on a different social media channels that shall remain nameless, Ivana. But yeah,
You're kinder than I am, that's for sure, Connor, but we've always known that.
exactly. Well, I don't know. I don't know about
Exactly.
that. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But Ivana, one of the things that's really been fascinating to me throughout the history of doing this show, and it's still fascinating, is the labor market, and particularly the labor market in what I would describe as the West or the global North, right? Whereby you've got the United States, UK, Germany, Netherlands, Ireland, Poland, um, countries like that.
Don't forget France.
I'm not exactly France too, right? So you've got like
These things.
that one's true, but although the labor laws there are off the charts, but that's
Yeah.
their choice, that's their country. But
Right. Right.
um, but really, what I'm interested in is the labor markets are full, right? But most economies, with maybe the exception of the United States, are teetering or have been teetering on the brink of recession, right? Companies, apart from the tech companies, have been reducing their forces. Companies are hiring like mad, still, and they cannot get the talent they need. And I'm wondering what your views are about that, Ivana. What can we do to maybe solve for some of these challenges and problems? It's been called the labor market paradox. Any thoughts and opinions on I suppose why we've got to this point of full employment? Is it less people in the labor market because of COVID? Is it because, for example, we're not letting people into your countries the way we used to, right? It's like if you're in the UK and you're European, right? It's really hard to get in and also stay after Brexit, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I can't remember the figures, but it was something in the order of magnitude of about 3 million people were unable to work in the UK anymore, right? So you've got all these different factors. The USA, a lot of the talk during the election was around, well, the borders are open, but are they really open from the perspective of H-1B visa, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know, right? But it's really interesting, and I suppose what I'm interested in, Ivana, is what is your take on all of this?
Such an important question and a great question. And of course, the answer is multifaceted. But I believe at the heart of all of these issues is the fear that permeates through our cultures, especially in the business culture. Fear of losing something if we allow others to come in, fear of having really important conversations in a very direct way and empathetic way, fear of being authentic and saying things that you believe because you fear that you're going to be judged, fear of somebody taking, again, something away from you. And I think that is the crux of all of these issues. And it really is I mean, I hate to say it, but it's really a kind of a mental health situation at this point, and this constant battling of, competing for resources. When did we have to compete for resources? Look at how much money and power these countries that you've mentioned have. And, we've done such a good job also helping other countries. But over time, we have also allowed this fear to permeate into the core and DNA of our society. And it is a real issue. People don't want to or afraid to make some decisions at work or have conversations at work because they think that, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired. There's not a lot of jobs out there. I have to support my family. These are real concerns. And so, how do we how do we actually break through that fear, which is I mean, I'm seeing it as a living being entity at this point. It is so powerful, and I'm seeing it in everybody, including myself. We all have those moments of, oh my God, am I going to say something inappropriate on Connor's podcast, for example, like, which can't happen. I know. I've heard the F bombs come out of your mouth.
Exactly. You're a good company.
No, but it is a real important question because it permeates into everything that we do, into our personal lives. Then we take that into work and into our work lives that we take it home. It's this constant evolution of, oh my gosh, what is going to happen, and looking at tomorrow instead of living our best moment right now, having those conversations and connecting with people. And of course, the technology, the amazing technology that has been developed over the last couple of decades doesn't help, because we're not using it as important tools to leverage to address some of these issues. We're using them to hide behind the issues. And that's where I believe the important conversations need to happen.
Yeah, I agree, Ivana. I was speaking at this sounds very grand, of course. I was speaking at an event in Ireland recently called the Talent Summit, and it's really, they've had some amazing speakers. I exclude myself from that, but AJ Thomas from OpenAI, Pat McCord, the CHRO from Netflix, proper, as I would describe, heavy hitters in the HR procurement space. But one of the things that I was speaking about was fear. And it's weird. In Western economies that are at full employment, inflation is diminished. The purchasing power is starting to even out. A lot of people have been lucky enough to get salary increases, but of course,
Mhm.
the salary increases of 20% have been matched by the price of cereal going up by 22%. So really, you're getting a
Right.
3% increase when you strip it back, right? But people theoretically should feel more positive, right? But there's a sense of fear that I can see out there, particularly around jobs, right? And
Mhm.
I think about potential. I'm not sure if it's because of the reductions in force that we've seen in tech. I'm not sure if it's because the traditional job is declining as we move from full-time employment to independent work or gig work or up and down flex work, or, and this is my own personal belief, is it to do with AI and the fear that is starting to creep in around artificial intelligence and its potential to displace jobs? Now, when you say displace is such a neutral word, right? But what that actually means is you don't got a job. If you're one of the people that's displaced, you're done, right? And
Yeah.
I was looking at I'm a bit of a geek, Ivana. I know you're a regular listener to the show, right? But
No news to me, Connor. Don't
exactly,
worry.
I know I lead a sad life, um, but the World Economic Forum did a recent jobs report for this year, right? And again, they focused on AI and its impact on jobs. Now, their figures and their forecasts have changed dramatically, but in short, their estimate between 2024 and 2027 is that 69 million jobs will be created, 84 million will be lost. I think it was 84 million. Well, correct that if it's incorrect. It's either 83 or 84 million, right? So it's quite a delta, right, in terms of jobs that will not be displayed, or sorry, job
Right.
people that will not be replaced, right? You're talking about what, 14 million, 15 million, something like that. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And that's just in professional categories, right? And we're already seeing this, I can look at across our client portfolio, Ivana, and I'm starting to see AI replacing the workers that we manage on behalf of our clients, in some cases by 66%. 66%. That's scary. And
That is true.
those people aren't going anywhere else, right? They're done. They're content creators, they're photographers, they're editors, they're marketing professionals. I know I'm going on about this now, but I suppose my question is, where is this fear in your view coming from?
So the AI conversation, I mean, that is just on top of what has already existed, in my opinion. First of all, it doesn't matter if you're a contingent worker at this point. companies are looking at the revenues, at, their shareholders. Yeah, I hate to say it, but most companies, I mean, the workers are disposable at this point. It is the last thing that they worry about. I hate to say it, despite, the efforts of HR and all that. It's become such a big problem that they don't know how to dig themselves out of it, and it's a very difficult problem to solve. So I think the fear, AI is just a layer on top of that fear. The fear has been happening for a long time, and I think the fear at the crux of it is the more you have, and that fear starts permeating into your DNA. By the time you hit your mid 30s and 40s, you've got a family to support. If you are keeping up with the Joneses and, spending money on your extra home, your weekend home, or your college educations for your kids, which is, they're all important things. And, we want to have all those things and we all deserve those things. But if we're not approaching in a balanced way our budgeting at home, then of course that fear is going to be more and more prevalent, depending on your situation. When I was at Morgan Stanley in, I guess starting in '07, and before that as well, one of the things that I knew I had to do for myself was put aside a pretty significant portion of my salary in savings, because I did not personally want anybody, not the company, not any future company, not uh, a spouse or anyone, to be able to take away my decision-making power. I knew that was instinctually, I think that I really had to make those decisions and not go on, 3 fancy vacations that year, maybe just one, whatever it is. Like, I found some type of balance so that I can save enough money and empower myself. And so I don't think that the companies are going to find the solution for employees or contract workers. I think we all need to be very honest with ourselves and say, okay, we're facing this right now. What can we do to work around this or work with it? This is a new environment. We're not going to succeed in the old paradigm. We're not going to succeed if we continue working within this box or this, these set of rules that were created for us. So let's get together and create a new set of rules and empower ourselves with things like a savings account, and with things like, not overextending. That will happen to all of us on a month or two basis. But the more you get into that, the more power you're giving away to these large companies who are making these decisions for us. And of course, the fear is going to be absolutely debilitating, regardless of who you are in that scenario.
Wow. I love your analysis there, Ivana. I suppose I would sum it up as the following. People are your greatest resource
Yeah.
until they're not. And I think that's probably the best way I would sum up in my mind what you've just been talking about. The other thing that I find quite interesting, Ivana, just about technology in general and its impact on jobs, is the following. So over the last 30 years, the cost of technology is decreasing, and it's actually been decreasing almost vertically, right? Like
Right.
like this, right? For example, I think, let me see. Yeah, price of a television set in the United States fell by approximately 100%, or precisely 98% between 1997 and 2022. The cost to train an AI system has decreased in a 10-year period by 99.95%, right? But get this, right? And I wish I had a graph to show this. If you look at the European Union labour statistics or the Irish labour statistics, guess what's going up and is continuing to go up? The cost of labour, i.e. people, right? So you've
Mhm.
got technology moving like this in terms of the cost, got people costs moving like this. So if you're a business, what are you going to do? you have an obligation to make a profit, right? You're talking to me today from the United States. I'm talking to you from Ireland, both of which are capitalist countries. We're not in business as social enterprises, even though we've got a social responsibility and potentially a responsibility to people that work with us, right? Of course we do, but we've got a responsibility to ourselves and our shareholders, right? But when you look at those two data points and crossing over, if you got to choose between AI and people, and AI is cheaper, efficient, better, what are you going to do? And that's not just a question for you, Ivana. It's a question for most business leaders that I think.
It's an important question,
Yeah.
and a difficult one to answer. Yeah,
Yeah.
very difficult. Well, again, I think, I would land more on that balanced approach again on this, especially where we are now. I mean, we're not in a place where AI has taken over. We are in a place where AI is an increasingly important component of our tech stack. If we can get away from the fear of AI and embrace it, because we have to at this point, it's not going away. If we as individuals and as corporations can embrace it and educate ourselves on how best to utilize it, I think the answers will come in that process. Because from my opinion, this has to be a blended approach. AI is not going to completely take over an entire workforce, not today, especially. It's also not trained well enough to allow it to just, especially in the workforce, area that we're in, like there's no way we're going to, allow an AI to make 100% of the decision on a compliance question, for example. These are really important questions that could put your company at risk. And so having a blended approach and leveraging things like AI that are so important and can really reduce your administrative burdens and automate certain things so that you can, and train it, by the way. Like I wouldn't, take an AI solution that was trained by, Amazon, no offense by Amazon. I want to train it myself and, make sure that it's doing what I want that's important for my values of my company. But taking that and also at the same time enabling the employees to actually go and do other things with their time, like building relationships, right? And yes, you may have to see a reduction in staff, and the headcount is getting increasingly expensive, across the world, not just, in our countries. But if you can have that balanced approach and you as a worker embrace educating yourself about AI and really lean into the AI and help, organize and really create that balanced approach within the organization and help that organization understand why it's important and where it should not be implemented and why your human capital is more important in certain areas, then I think we can mitigate at least some of this, embrace, some of these new challenges, educate the workforce so that they can, start embracing some of the new technology and not feel like they're being left out in the dark and have no options in front of them. There's so much information at our fingertips, let's use it wisely.
Yeah, I think that's a really lovely approach, Ivana, but also great advice, right? If you're worried about this, or if you're within an organization and you want to almost protect yourself, I think that's outstanding, actually. So,
Right.
Ivana, I had a question that I wanted to ask you, which is, does it matter does it matter where work is done?
That will depend widely on the organization and how they manage their workers. It will also matter, I think, for the worker itself. Look, we're not all made alike. Some of us have a lot of distractions at home, and some of us, have, like me, have ADHD and, yeah, have their own issues, right?
Yeah.
So I think that if we're really being honest with ourselves as the worker, and if we're really being honest as the company, it's a tough balance, but those conversations, if, brought up, in an honest way, I think there is the right balanced approach in that as well. For us, I mean, as a tech company, it's worked brilliantly because we have been able to actually breed that into our workers from day one. So we have the benefit of being able to really identify the type of culture we want to build from scratch, as opposed to going into a large company and trying to change that. That's much more difficult, right? But I think there is a way to really support workers and really connect with each other online if done appropriately and with the right tools and with the right support. But if you just say, okay, everyone can work from home and leave everyone to their own devices, it's not going to work and you're going to have challenges.
Yeah.
So again, that community and that support has to be there in order to enable that. In the same way that if you're in the office every day, it's not any different. Just because we have a computer screen in front of us, that doesn't mean that we can't endorse the same concepts as, in-person work.
Yeah, I concur, Ivana. Like you have built a company that's distributed around Europe in particular, at least the business that I run within CXC, and it was like that largely from day one. It wasn't because we wanted to be remote first; it's because we had to be.
Right.
We had to be in the following for the following reasons. One, cost. We had very limited capital at the beginning, so we couldn't really afford fancy offices or really any decent offices. And then two, we're headquartered in Ireland, but all the talent we needed to run our programs and solution them and design them and implement them,
Right.
we're in the UK, Netherlands, Germany. So we had to go and get the talent where the talent existed, shared
Yeah.
services, tax, India, Poland, the list goes on. And
Sure.
it's worked well. But I think what you do have to be intentional about, to your point, is around creating that culture, around hiring people that can work autonomously or
Right.
semi-autonomously, that you create a culture of delegation, that you create an esprit de corps where everyone's pulling in the same direction. And,
Right.
full disclosure, I found that most easiest in the early days when there was less. In some respects, less is more in that context, right? And as you become a bigger enterprise and you move from that scale up to grown up type of business, it's harder in a way,
Yeah.
even if you've got those key cultural tenets of delegation, autonomy, because ultimately there might not be a manual for that sort of passed across the organization.
Mhm.
And you might start to hire people that don't fit the culture that you can't identify from word one. It's a tough one.
That's actually an important point, is the
Yeah.
hiring process, I think.
Yes.
So once you get to that scalable, and growth mode where you have, hundreds, maybe dozens of employees, it's very easy to just, put in the hiring bucket these skills and not really dig into who is this person and do
Yes.
they actually match our culture. Those are difficult conversations. They can and should be happening in that hiring process.
Yeah.
And the problem is that when you get to a certain scale, I mean, even at the small scale, I mean, we're moving so fast, it's very easy to not take the time to step back and evaluate, okay, who
Sure.
are we hiring? And so, but if you do the hard work in the beginning, just like anything, it will pay off tenfolds.
Yeah.
And we one of the things that I really pride ourselves, and Allison really was driving this process in our with a big team in Serbia. One of the things that was really instilled into our original 4 developers was, okay, let's really take the time to, no, we don't want to do a crash course, we don't want to just put butts in seats. We're on a timeline deadline, maybe somebody left, or maybe we just got a big new customer, we need to supplement the team, whatever the scenario is. Let's actually take a breath and let's actually take the time to interview these people properly. And because of that, our turnover is so low. I mean, it's staggeringly low. And I think it's because of that. And I give our team credit for that. The Renhead team in Serbia is the most phenomenal team I have seen built. And I give Allison the credit for all of that. But we have such a unique culture. And I think it starts at the interview process.
Wow. I agree, Ivana. I think that's the best time to really identify and say, hey, you're going to fit into this culture because of X, Y, Z,
Yeah.
or you won't. And, thanks for your time. So, Ivana, I've loved hearing your story, right? And the story of your co-founder and your journey to get to the Renhead point. But I'd like to finish our conversation with a question we ask all of our guests, which is the following. What, if any, are your predictions or prediction for the future work?
My prediction is I have to be honest here, even though you're in the staffing space, but my prediction is that the staffing companies, that space gets consolidated. And I think more from leveraging technology from a sourcing standpoint and sourcing candidates. I think that piece, at least in the entire workforce process, is being enabled by tech. And the smarter the tech is, and now all the AI solutions that are being instilled in the tech and the processes, we're going to see a lower need or not as much need for staffing firms to actually source talent. So, we're seeing, I think that there's going to be an uptick in direct sourcing, for example. I think we're going to see an uptick in internally run programs. And this really is stemming not just from the technology that's enabling people to really drive more of a relationship based, sourcing strategy, but also, from a space of, hey, we haven't had a lot of visibility as buyers into how these programs are run. We really want to take back control over how our program is run. And I think that for a time, we'll see a lot of companies internally running their programs. And I think not too dissimilar to the RPO market and the cycles in the RPO market that we've seen in the past, we will swing back the other way, but it'll look very different. I think it'll be more virtual. I think we will be more comfortable hiring independent contractors compliantly, which will be very important. I think the EOR play is going to have definitely an uptick as the staffing play has a downtick in the market. I can see your smile there. I'm sure that will make you happy.
Yes, it does.
And, I also see technologies like Renhead have a bigger play because of the lack of having to go in and unwind these spaghetti bowls of integrations and really just, taking an off the shelf product and being able to customize it on your own within a few weeks or a few days even, depending on the situation, and not having to have, an 18-month onboarding and all of these integrations. Integrations are going to be still important with certain things, but we have so many integrations right now that, companies are being held hostage and, they're using solutions that don't work for them anymore because they're so scared of untangling those integrations, or they don't have the resources that where they can actually take a pause in the projects that they're working on to say, okay, let's actually fix this issue. So just on surface level, those are some of the things that I see as, the future of work today.
Wow. Thanks, Ivana. Thank you so much. And by the way, I agree with many of your thoughts and analysis on the future work. And Ivana, thanks so much for taking the time to spend with me and with our audience today. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, like I enjoy all of our conversations, but it's been great to have you on the show, and thanks for making the time. So, Ivana, where is the best place for our audience to come and chat to you and find out more about the amazing platform that is Renhead?
Thank you for asking. So our website is renhead.com. It's RENHEAD .com. And there are some resources in there. You can also reach out to us via email at sales@renhead.com, and our team will direct you depending on your question. But this was so much fun, Connor, and definitely look forward to having a pint soon in person.
Ivana, I've thoroughly enjoyed our time today, and I love hearing your insights,
Likewise.
your story, and your thoughts on where the world and the future work is going. So, continued success to you and the Renhead platform, and of course to your co-founder as well. So lovely to see you, Ivana, and take care.
Lovely to see you as well. And thank you for being real as always.
I did my
So good
best.
to talk to you. Yes. You
You
do
too,
a good
Ivana.
job.
Take care.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Open Talent Report with Connor Heaney. If you found this podcast informative and engaging, make sure you subscribe, tell your friends, and follow us on all your favorite streaming platforms.